I would like to call Joe Morrison once again on the stage to moderate our next session, which is youth development. We can't seem to have enough of you, Joe. I would now ask the speakers to come upon the stage, whoever is present here today. I'll just announce the names of the speakers. Andoni Bombin from Atletico de Bilbao, Madis Davidson, former Al Jazeera FC coach, Richard Allen from Japan FC, and Prashant Singh, Thane City FC.
I can't hear him. No, I still can't hear Richard. I can see him, no problem at all, but I can't hear him. One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me know when you've got Richard. I'll begin this session on youth development with those who are present in the room. Welcome to you all, and welcome to Mads Davison as well. It's good to have you all here and those who are present. Youth development. The youth is the future. It's important, vastly important. What's your take on the development of youth football in India as we sit here today?
Well, one thing for sure is we've seen a drastic change over the past decade, especially how the youth development has decentralized. Initially, it was just Tata Football Academy who was giving all the youth players, and now we've seen so many other centers of sports excellence that have come in, and now there is not just one factory that's producing all the youth players in India, but there are multiple factories. We have people in Punjab, we have Bangalore, we have Mumbai. Of course, we still have Jamshedpur Tata Football Academy. So I think one thing for certain is youth talent production has been decentralized. Initially, it was just Tata Football Academy. So that's a big change we've seen over the past decades.
Andoni, we can see him as well. Andoni, coming to you, how do you see, as someone from afar, someone looking from the outside into India, how do you see the development of youth here in the country?
Hello everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation and for this challenge to share knowledge with all of you. I think all of the countries and of course your country there in India, you are growing up because you are investing on football. You are preparing your coaches. The coaches is one of the most important keys that we have, and I think you are going to have success in the some future, because I think these kind of projects, these kind of events are really interesting to understand that the football is a machine that is running really fast, and we need to be in the correct moment that are all the academies, Europe academies, the rest of the world academies. So I think India is gonna be success in the future.
Have we got Richard yet? Can we hear him?
I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes, now we've got you. Now we've got you, Richard. We can see you and hear you. What's been the biggest changes you've seen in youth development over the last, I was going to say decade, but maybe longer than that?
I think certainly if you look in many countries, there's probably been a bigger investment. Certainly in the UK, there was a big shift. In England, with the introduction of EPPP, the clubs grew so that the biggest department within the clubs were their academies, more investment, better facilities, and I think that's had an impact in terms of the young players that have come through those professional programs. I still think there's always that issue at grassroots level, how you ensure that the people have got the right facilities with the right level of coaching. I think there are more coaches, more qualified coaches, and often people are measuring success on how many people have got their B licenses or A licenses or pro licenses. I'm not sure there are that many better coaches. I don't know if there is a correlation between the two, but certainly there are more coaches. And clearly that's really, really important all the way through from grassroots all the way into the professional game. So, yeah, I mean, I think there has been an improvement. I think we see new technologies. I think analysis and data and a whole range of things I think have come to help the coach. But I still think that we need coaches that are generalists first and foremost before they become specialists. So they have a really good understanding about not only coaching, but about how children learn, about how adults learn, and how we develop and improve players.
Do you think there's more strategy behind it now, more emphasis given to the big picture than there was maybe a decade ago where it was ad hoc or piecemeal?
Yeah, I mean, I think clubs now, again, at professional level, will have positions like a technical director, a head of coaching, an academy director, who probably is more responsible for that kind of strategy and planning. So I think it's more thought out than it has ever been before. You know, we've always produced good quality players all over the world. There are players that come through different programs and schemes. But I think there's more of a holistic approach. I think we're covering more areas, so it's not just on the field, it's off the field. But yeah, you're right. I think there is more planning and thought gone through it. And of course, you know, if you can get your own players through your own systems into your first team, that becomes an important part of how your club survives and, you know, through player trading to make money. And a lot of clubs survive on that across the world.
Do you, Prashant, look at the Triple P as an example? Do you look at what the likes of they're doing in other parts of the world? Is that what you focus on, Prashant? Do you focus on other parts of the world? Do you look at other parts of the world to get that guidance?
To be honest, we should be focusing basically on what we have in hand, because a copy-paste model, because what is happening here is we are just trying to follow the flavor of the month. Like if one country is doing good, we try to see what they are doing and try to implement it. And at the policy level, I think we are a little bit too impatient, because if you implement a policy, to see the actual impact of what the policy makes at least takes like a decade or two. But here we want to see what's the impact of a new policy within 3 years, 5 years. We call 7 years a long-term development plan, whereas 7 years is a very nascent stage for a policy to actually gauge the impact of the policy. So for us, we are just focusing at the community that we have. First, it's very important to understand the community, and once we understand the community and the culture, only then can we custom make a program that suits the culture, the socio-economic factors of that community, because something that works in Germany might not necessarily be replicated here, because there are so many differences. So yes, again, the initial years, at least for us, is going to go in establishing a culture, understanding our own community, and to build something that's unique and that's tailor-made instead of just copying.
If you can just quickly explain to us your tie-up with Southampton, what is different about that? Because there are a lot of clubs that do a lot of tie-ups nowadays. What is different with your tie-up?
So here, when we tied up with Southampton, of course, they have everything ready. They have the curriculum, they have the session plans, but when we tied up with them, the partnership is going to be 3 + 3 years, in which they are going to help us design a curriculum. Because curriculum, if you Google, you'll get 100 curriculums on board, and again, online, and you cannot implement them as per your will. So to even design a curriculum, it takes a lot of understanding of what's the need of the community, of how the community is looking at sport. Because earlier we were having some speakers who were talking about the importance of science and so many other things. I think the number one thing should be culture, because, you know, in the African countries like Senegal, for example, and some other African countries, they don't have proper water, they don't have access to food.
Basic facilities,
yet they are producing top quality players, is because for them, football is a ticket to a better life. And in India, I mean, if you look in Mumbai, where are the, all the posh houses? It's been occupied by either cricketers or Bollywood stars. So the community aspires to have a life like the ones that the Bollywood stars have, like the cricketers have. So in the Northeast, if you see, it's predominantly footballers. So for us, it is basically understand the community, and Southampton is going to assist us in...
Have they been here yet? Have they come across and studied
yet.
your...
Two of our coaches are in Southampton right now.
Okay.
And those guys are visiting India on the 15th of September. And then they would be visiting the communities in and around Thane, as well as we're doing a coach education workshop in Mumbai, Delhi and Bangalore.
I just want to come back to you both, but first of all, you, Richard. There's been a huge discussion here today about competitive matches in Indian football at the senior level. I want to take that on to the junior level. How many competitive matches do you think, Richard, are... What's the ideal, in your opinion, for a season for young players?
I think you've always got to be careful. I know everybody's looking for kind of absolutes, and you want me to tell you that you should have 18 and a half games per season or something. I think it depends, and I know that may be deemed as sitting on the fence. I think there are lots of factors to consider. Firstly, how do you define what a competitive game is? Is it just two teams in kit with a referee and a lines people or assistant referees? Is it that organised game, or is it the game that you have within your training session? Is it an international tournament game? Is it a domestic game? Is it, so I think it depends on the age and stage and phase of the teams and the players that you're working with. I think more importantly is the kind of the level of challenge that you put in those games and the types and the variety of different games. So we used to work on the Lingby model at Tottenham, where we would say, 50% of the games need to be at the same, the right level. So it's a good game, could go either way. 25% of the game should be probably foot to the floor, and you might get beat, and actually you probably will get beaten. And then 25, probably a little bit under capacity. And as a model, I think that's quite a good way of looking. Generally within the UK, for example, within the foundation, the youth development phase, that kind of goes from, under 9s all the way through to under 16s. Most clubs are playing, if you call them organised games, organised by the league, probably between 20 and 25 games per season. But everybody supplements those games with other games, friendly games, going to international tournaments. Probably they want to get to 30 or more games. I'm a believer in games rather than training. I think games are important. I think at the slightly older age, the professional development phase, they're probably around the 25 to 30 mark, and they probably need about 35. But I think it depends. Every club will have its own ideal amount of people or amount of games that they want to have. I think for me it's about the variety, and certainly in Japan here, I'm pushing very hard for our teams and our players to have more international experience. We need more games against different opposition. When I was in London, it's great. You're playing on a Sunday with the younger ones. Oh, it's Arsenal next week. Oh, it's Charlton. Then it's Fulham. Then it's West Ham. And I think Prashant is quite right. You can't replicate that. What is good in England doesn't necessarily mean it's good in India or it's good in Germany. We for many years try to copy everybody else. It doesn't work. England DNA project and now Japan DNA project, I think, is really interesting to kind of focus down on what you need within your particular situation. And unfortunately, you can't go to IKEA and buy a flat pack club or an academy where it says this is how you build it, this is what you're going to have in it, and these are how many games. It depends. And I know that's probably not the answer that you want to hear, and people say want that kind of, that
a number, Richard, a number. You did say 20 to 25, so I'll let you away with that. You briefly touched upon there, and I'll come to Andoni in just a second. But you first, Richard. You talked there about international experience and playing teams from other countries. Is that because you want the young players, to face different problems and different football cultures?
I think if you speak to people in England, especially as they're getting older, the two types of game that is a good test, not necessarily the under-23s league or PL2 games, it's more the kind of the international Champions League games, because you're you're going up against some of the best teams in Europe and being given different tactical problems. Then it's the checker trade, which is the lower league cup, which is can you kick it, head it, and survive at that level of football. So that's a good test. But yeah, I think it's really good for young players. And I've had lots of young players who say to me, we've been playing Real Madrid or Barcelona since our under-9 year. So actually, by the time they get to first team level, they've been doing that and are experienced in doing that. But yeah, there are different tactical situations they have to figure out. They are playing in different conditions. So people say to me, why do you have the type of player that we have in Japan? It's really hot here. It's really humid. And for players to come and experience that, I think is really worthwhile, especially for not only club football, but for international football. You need to give your players that experience and opportunity with different opposition in different conditions, giving different technical challenges, going away as a team, living together, a whole range of things that they wouldn't get in their normal games program.
Do you feel the same about that, Andoni? At Athletic Bilbao, how much exposure do your young players have to different styles outside of Spain, outside of Europe even? How much do they get exposed to that?
I think I would like to connect this question with previous questions because I think to face the difficulties is really important element to develop players as the correct way. Then I think we need to play as much matches as possible. But we are lucky because we have regular competition every single weekend. We have match with all the categories, and we used to have interesting matches all the weekends. Anyway, I think it's important, and I'm gonna link this question. I think it's important to have another experience. So for us, it's really important to try to find the correct tournaments and put to our players in this new context. Try to feel another experience. Try to play against other teams, professional teams, other countries' teams. We at the moment we have not had any exchange program. We are thinking on that because we think that could be interesting for the players' development. Try to put them in another professional academy and try to try to see if you are a real player, because the player in the future they're gonna move for sure from on different teams, and I think this kind of experience are really interesting for the development of the player. So I think if we can provide this kind of experience, of course, if we are talking about some kind of countries, because maybe the competitive level there is not good enough and they need to face difficulty in other countries. So we are lucky because in Spain we have a really good competitive program. We have good leagues, and the challenge for the players I think is quite good. And but anyway, I've been also in China, coaching in China, and I saw that for if we wanna look in for the correct players development, I need to face difficulty. And here in China, we don't have enough level, so we need to move to Europe, move to other countries to try to find this, and get this improvement facing the difficulty.
Can I just ask you a separate question on the back of that? Bilbao have traditionally had the majority of their players from the Basque Country. Do you still employ that policy, and how does it affect your youth program if that policy is still in place?
Of course, we have a really particular philosophy, and I think this is one of the keys of our success. We just play with Basque Country players, or players who have been formed in some of the Basque Country academies. Then for us, our academy model is very important. We need to be focused on the player. This doesn't mean that we are not fight or try to get titles. No, we have been success regarding titles. We won 8 Spanish League, 24 cups, 3 Super Cups, the last one two seasons ago. So, but all of this we have achieved respecting our philosophy, just playing with Basque Country players. Then I think our game model, or the game model, should be the base to get success attending this program, because we need to be focused on identify and select the most talented players in all the territories that we are working. We need to be focused on develop our academy players in all the football dimension. And of course, we need to be focused on provide to each of our players the best promotion strategies to rise from the academy to the first team, because we need to give them confidence. We need to think that the player that we have is our priority. We are not be looking for, okay, we are going to move to Brazil or to Turkey to sign any player. No, our players are the most important element that we have. And I think we are absolutely convinced that the academy model is the key to get a successful performance. So even working with the local players, if you develop a good academy program or academy model, and understanding that there are different processes, for sure you can improve and increase your academy level and get that target that I think everyone's have, is put your youth players in the top league, in the first team, and after you are gonna find your target. In our case is to be competitive in our team. Other class, maybe they're going to find to sell players and to try to find another strategies. But we want to be competitive in our first team.
Prashant, because you've just started, because your project is just at the beginning, obviously you have to focus locally, and we're talking about Bilbao taking players from the Basque Country. Will you expand nationally after you've established yourself, or would you consider a policy like Bilbao whereby you only focus on developing talent from the local region?
Yes, I mean, one thing for sure is Thane City FC is a very hyper-local brand, and it represents the community. So we are not saying that we would not explore opportunities to scout from other regions of India. But for now, what we are doing is we are focusing on the talents in and around the community of Thane. And once we have a residential facility in place, we would definitely be looking at hotspots of India, and especially the Northeast, the East Coast. That's where we'll be going to have some trials as well.
I just want to come back to Richard for a second. Obviously, creating talent, creating a pool of talent is really important. You can't just have a handful of players. What would you focus on? If I asked you to focus on just one thing, what would you focus on to generate a pool of young talent, Richard?
Well, it was interesting, and listening to the Bilbao model, which is really impressive. I visited there in kind of late 2000, I guess, or 2005 onwards at some point. And what impressed me was their connection with their local grassroots clubs, the support of those, how they... And I tried to replicate that when I went back to Tottenham and then when I went to Queen's Park Rangers. And in a roundabout way, that answers your question, because I think that involvement with local clubs and developing and helping to develop players obviously increases the pool of players that you can select from. You know, you need to make sure that you have the right players in those clubs who are getting the right coaching, which means then, as the bigger mothership, I suppose, the bigger club can then go in and have an opportunity to bring those players into your academy. So those relationships are really, really important, especially in a very competitive market. And I know in Bilbao it's slightly different in terms of the clubs. You know, there are a number of clubs there. It was very different in London, where you've got some of the biggest clubs in the world, and it was very, very competitive. But by creating great relationships, impacting in terms of their development by helping them with their coaching, even helping them financially, meant that you had a bigger pool of players that were likely to come into your club. The basic principle is, how do you get as many players as you can and keep them for as long as possible without making a decision on them? Now, that's really hard to do within your club situation, but if you've got these partnership clubs or whatever, where you feel that you have some trust and thought that they're going to stay within your program rather than going somewhere else, it just enlarges the amount of people that you can come. I think also, and maybe different in England, everybody's fishing in the same pond, so you've got to try and find another pond. And how do you do that? And again, we've done a lot of work in England around understanding other communities. So whether that's the South Asian community, really underrepresented in football, but huge football playing communities, which people just don't go and watch. So how do you encourage clubs to make sure, listen, you're saying there's not the quality, or you're saying there's not the pool of players, but that's because everybody's going to that small pond of players that everybody goes to every week, the same games, the same tournaments, the same schools, the same clubs. Why don't you broaden out and look elsewhere? And I challenge anybody anywhere in any country to say, I'm told here in Japan, well, we don't have certain communities. Well, you only have to do a bit of research, and guess what? There are communities that perhaps aren't being accessed or don't have the access to the opportunities that you might better give them. Why don't you go there? Because nobody else is looking in that area.
Do you think you can be too expansionist, Richard? I'm sure you're familiar with Wallsend Boys Club, which seemed to lose that connection with Newcastle United as they became a more global, or searched globally, certainly nationally anyway, for talent, when Wallsend Boys Club was really a factory, wasn't it, for the team in the 80s and 90s?
Yeah, and it's interesting. When I was at Tottenham, we had loads of scouts, and we were scouting everywhere. Not just London. We were scouting all over the world. And in fact, all our successful players came within about a 3-mile radius, apart from a couple: Nabil Bentaleb, Danny Rose. Everybody else came from the 3 or 4 mile radius of the club. So, did we waste our resource by going all over the world? When I went to Queen's Park Rangers, we thought, do you know what? West London is brilliant. There's loads of players. And just maybe the big clubs aren't concentrating on some of those areas because they have huge programs where they're looking all over the world. So we had a much smaller team, and we concentrated on one particular area. And that was successful for us. So you have to cut your cloth. But yeah, there's always that issue that perhaps you miss out. And things do change. I think it is difficult in the Northeast in terms of, not so many players coming through, local lads like they used to, because the big centres in the UK are London, Manchester, and probably Birmingham and the Midlands. That's where the majority of players, that Manchester-Liverpool region, the kind of northwest, and not so many players anymore are coming from the northeast. And maybe that's because of the difference in communities and the way the game's developed, and the type of players that you're looking for. But yeah, you've got to be careful that you don't decide to go off and look around the world. Again, looking at the Bilbao model, stick to your principles, understand what works for you. Because guess what? In Yokohama, we have a great group of players. We don't need to go any further. You can get enough players in Yokohama. Even though there are 2 clubs here, we can get enough players from the local community because there are good young players here.
By the way, just a quick interlude here. Do we have Mads Davison? Do we have him?
I'm here, yes.
You're there, Mads. Sorry, I didn't know whether you were connected or not, Mads. Great to catch up with you. You've had a great success story with Al Jazeera over the last couple of years. I've been following it closely during my time in the United Arab Emirates. Just to bring you into the conversation, Mads, what are the things that you've learned from operating in a very different cultural environment in terms of developing the talent?
Yeah, I think I was prior to Al Jazeera. I worked 7 years in China, so I actually spent most of the last decade in Asia or in the Middle East. And I think what was said in the room is one of the main keys to adapt to the local culture. I often say to my youth coaches, adapt or die, because we have an issue sometimes coming as a European. knowing that we probably have more knowledge football-wise than these football developing countries. And therefore, we come in with a little bit of arrogance. We come in with a little bit of "I'll teach you" mentality, and I can guarantee you that won't work. I have seen tons of coaches coming to China, top coaches, but they did not understand the culture. They did not respect the culture, and within 6 months, they were gone. So I think the key here is actually not about football. It's about culture and adapting to the local environment, understanding how can you thrive here, how can you be successful within this organization's culture.
When you go into these environments, Mads, do you look at the talent first, or do you look at the coaches that are on the ground first? What's the priority for you?
That depends a little bit of the club strategy. I worked firstly in Shanghai, where the club was founded the day I joined. So that's a very different project because we had nothing. The club was founded and we signed. And I remember the first meeting, the secretary asked me, "How many balls do you need?" So we literally started from scratch. So that project was different. In Al Jazeera, I came into a club that hasn't been successful for 4 or 5 years on the first team level, and we had to find a competitive edge. A little bit like Andoni mentioned about Bilbao, they have found their competitive edge in the market. In Spain, they're different than the other clubs. And that strategy is often to choose what not to be. It's easy to choose something, but actually strategy is about choosing what you are not. And in Al Jazeera, we found out that we could, by using more local players, actually be more competitive because all the other clubs were using their focus on foreign players, using all their money on foreign players, using all their resources to find these 3-4 key foreign players. And suddenly we started the season playing with only 2 foreign players compared to the other clubs, 4 or 5 foreign players. We had 9 local players in the lineup, which we were criticized for. We were called unambitious, we were called naive. And 9 months later, we won the league. So it was a nice project to be able to prove that it can be done if you respect the culture and you get the people in the environment behind you.
Having been to all of these different countries and these different jurisdictions, Mads, what is the one thing that you found was a common denominator between all of them? What is the one thing that you found was familiar in each jurisdiction that you went to?
Yeah, and these, well, I call them football development countries, but I would also put India in that pot. Is of course that there's some still, let's say, a disconnection between the top and the bottom. Saying, for example, the ownership could be a board and the people on the ground. So, for example, sometimes going in with teaching your youth coaches that result doesn't matter. For example, that you have to develop players, that you will be judged over time on how many players you can deliver to the next level instead of winning some ridiculous youth cup. That is actually can happen on the ground, but in the end there can be a disconnection to the top. So suddenly your youth team maybe lose a game 7-8-0, and you see a reaction from the top that they're not happy with this because they don't understand the process. They're not quite sure what you're doing in terms of succeeding in 4 or 5 years' time. They start to get afraid that their club might not be on track because why do our under 14s lose 6-0? But actually what you're doing is you are preparing the club for the future, but it can be difficult to prove. So what I always done is I tried to make, a showcase where you prove, you deliver results, and then you kind of win time to actually do the long-term project. I think if you're just naive and saying, don't worry, you'll get a trophy in 7-8 years, you will also not be successful. So you have to find a showcase where you take one team or a project where you win something that is physical, that can be delivered to the boardroom, and then you win time to do the actual work, so to speak.
Buying time. Just coming back to you, Prashant, have you seen that here in your experience? Do you think there's too much emphasis in Indian football at the youth level for immediate results? Like Mads was talking about, maybe winning a local tournament, winning a regional cup, instead of developing these boys and girls for the next stage?
Yep, absolutely. And I think it's because of the lack of structure. Because at the youth level, we do not have structure. We have structure for the senior football. But when you come to youth, you'll have an ISL team, under 15 team, ISL's under 15 team, compete against a college team. So there is no structure in the youth. And of course, to save their name, they would go in for results, because an ISL team, under 15 team, I mean, if they lose to a college team, that would be something that they would not, they would not like that. So yes, even the coaches are put under pressure to get results, especially because of the lack of structure. Like if you see in Europe, the under 19 also has two divisions. There is a national under 19 and then there is a regional. Same goes for under 17, same goes for under 15. But in India, as long as you fulfill the accreditation criteria, the academy accreditation criteria, you are in. Irrespective of what kind of a team you have, irrespective if you are a high school team or an ISL club, you are just in and you are at the same level. So I think that is one of the policy level decisions that the people in power have to take in order to structure the youth football as well.
Do you think more care needs to be taken, Prashant, in choosing the scouts, developing the coaches who are coaching those players? Everyone has been talking, not just today, but in recent months and years in Indian football, about looking for the talent and developing the talent. But developing them with what? With people who don't understand how to coach, with people who don't understand what they're looking for in a player?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point raised, because even if we develop scouts, where are they going to scout? Because we need a platform. We need a platform, like we were talking about the number of games, minimum number of games. So once you have those minimum number of games, one is the players are going to develop by playing those games, and two is that now the scouts have a platform to scout. Where is a scout gonna, otherwise it's going to be a very hocus pocus ecosystem where a scout is in one village and a player is performing in that village, but who are we gauging that player against? What are the parameters? So once there is a structure in the youth system, then the scouts know where to go, and that's where even scouting makes more sense. Without a platform, it's even difficult to scout in a country like India where it's so diverse.
I'm just going to come back to Richard on this one. Have you seen this as well, Richard, on your travels? A lack of real deep understanding and ability and talent amongst the coaches and the scouts rather than the players themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crucial, and and I've seen it on my travel. I've seen it, in my own country. We think Europe is very well developed and England is great and all those kind of things. But it's only been recently that we've introduced kind of 5 levels of talent ID education within England. When I was working at the FA, it was one of the tasks that I had, because I felt it was really important to educate scouts, whether that be at the bottom end of grassroots. We have an online course for parents and coaches, because the club scout is only as good as the grassroots coach who picks the team. And if they have no understanding of the basic concepts of talent ID, they don't understand about relative age effect or maturation or the impact of bias on decision making or a whole range of things. Do they, I presented on A-license courses where the coaches couldn't define what is potential, what is talent, what is performance. And if you don't understand those basic concepts, then how do you go about looking for players? Because yes, you might have an issue about where to go and what games to watch, but if you don't understand the basic concepts, and then the next crucial bit is around how you link that with the philosophy of the place that you're working for, because clubs will be different. They'll have different things that they're looking for. So how do you link your philosophy to your coaching and development program, but also to what are you looking for? What are you looking for in your head coach? If you want to play a certain way, you need a certain head coach. But then what players do you need? Now, you might want to buy those players at the top end, so you need to make sure they fit with what you're trying to do. But you're also trying to develop players. So you have to be looking at certain types of players that might fit your model of development. And that might be different from club to club, and that's absolutely fine. It goes back to my IKEA thing. It's great. I don't want football to be IKEA. I want it to be individual, and different people have different thoughts. But there needs to be an education of scouts, and a number of countries now are picking up on that to ensure that they're scouts or coaches, whether they have standalone courses or whether it's included within their B and A license programs. But I think that's really, really important.
Where do parents come into this, Richard? I'm sure you've had to deal with quite a lot of parents over the years. In fact, I think parents are barred from being pitch side, aren't they, now in England at the youth level? But because I'm guessing parents are the biggest coaches of especially young players.
I think it's really important that you work with parents, because you need to get them to understand what you're trying to do. There's nothing worse than parents on one side giving different information to their children than the coaches on the other side. So I think, clubs miss a trick if they're not speaking with the parents, explaining what they're doing with them. So explaining, this week we've worked on playing out from the back. And on the weekend, it might not go so well because we're asking them to do different things. So it doesn't help when you say to the goalkeeper, punt it, just kick it, or to the defender, just whack it out. Because, they can do that, but we've been working on how to play out from the back. And at under 9 or under 10, you're going to make mistakes. They make mistakes with the first team doing it. But you need to be educating the parents to get them to understand what you're trying to do and how you're trying to develop a team. And to get the kind of basic concept of, we want you to encourage and support your child. It's a huge commitment for any parent to get their child through a program, an elite kind of football program, to support them, get them there, all those kind of things. So it makes a lot of sense to try and educate them, to get them to understand what you're trying to do. And if they don't, if they want to move to something else, then that's, there are lots of different options to go and do it if they don't quite believe in the philosophy that you have. But you need their buy-in.
A lot of parents live their dreams, don't they, through their kids? That's a fact. I just want to come back to Andoni for a second here. Where do parents come into the equation for Bilbao? Where do they fit into the whole plan? We've talked about strategy for the different age groups. We've talked about coaches. We've talked about scouting. Where do the parents, Andoni, fit in for you into your philosophy and your strategy? Do you have close contact with parents on a regular basis?
We need to understand that, of course, the parents are important part of the player development. We have our academy open to all of the parents. This means that we don't close the practice to the people. The practice, all the trainings are open to the parents, to the people who wanna watch the training that we are developing. So this means that if we are open, we understand that they can see what we are doing. So I think the parents are important part of the process. Then they need to know which is the process of each player. Then are very important the meetings. Understanding the roles. There are parents, we are coaches, or we are academy directors. So then we are gonna have a good communication channel because they need to know where is the player performance, where is the player development, where is the player improvement. We need to tell them in what moment of the process is the different player. But they need to understand that they are not there to give professional opinions. So, of course, we are gonna listen them, okay? Because we need to know sometimes about what is happening at home, what is happening at the school. We have a department who is working really close with the parents because we understand that we need to care everything what is around the player. It's not just the 2 hours that they are spending in our training center. No, there is more complex than this. So we have a department who is working with the families. So it's working, helping them to have a proper environment, to helping them in the players' studies. So in that communication, so we don't want we don't want to our coaches have a direct channel with the parents. I think that is not maybe the correct way to improve the players. But yes, we have another channel. We have a responsible who knows that he must report to the players regarding his development, his needs, everything that is around the player. Of course, the parents need to know. And that is the way that we are working on these topics, because we think that we need to work together. We need to work together because this is a complex sport. It's not just about you. You will come here. I'm gonna prepare you, and just training. You are gonna get the first team. No, there are. This is more complex than this, because they have their own life, no, out of the training center.
Thank you, Andoni. Can I just come back to you, Prashant, on this? Because I'm guessing here in India that the issue with parents is very, very different to what the guys were just talking about. Parents, in Europe especially, it's over-enthusiasm. They're too involved instead of letting the coaches take over. Here, do you face more of a challenge with parents in getting them to allow their kids to be involved in football rather than something else, another sport?
Yeah, especially in metros, we have both sets of parents. There are parents, like you mentioned, who are over-competitive and want to live their dreams through their children, but that's a number that's very low. Most of the parents, especially in the metros, I have seen some players training with us for the past 2-3 years. I've never seen their parents even once.
Wow.
Yeah.
Never seen their parents?
Never seen their parents, because it's usually their nanny or their driver dropping them off. Because for parents in India, football or sports in general is just a co-curricular. It's something that they want to do when they are not studying and when they are not playing PlayStation or on their TV or on their devices. So in India, it's not, because sports is not an industry yet, it's just a sector. So it's not looked as a employment avenue by parents. It's for them, it's just another hobby. Like a parent would not go and see how much of guitar, or monitor their guitar session. So it's similar to sports here. But I think, yes, there are some parents who are over enthusiastic, who want to live their dreams through their children, and especially during tournaments, grassroots tournaments, it becomes very difficult to manage them because the sidelines, they are louder than their coaches, their child's coaches.
Are you going to ban them from the touchline like they have done in England and other places?
In India, they would really take it personally. Because
really?
They would really take it personally because they don't have the understanding yet. But the only way to go about it is more parent workshops and more education in teaching them. Like we had a recent a session with the parents on the reverse dependency trap, like where the parents put the burden of their happiness on the child's performance. So if the child wins, they are happy. If the child wins, they are not happy.
That's huge pressure.
Yeah, in fact, it should be the other way around. The burden of the happiness of the child should be on the parent's shoulder. So it's very common in the United States where children are playing to get into college, and it's not even that important in India yet. But yeah, slowly we are seeing that shift and that paradigm shift, especially in which some of the parents are getting too involved. So
do you think we'll see more of that, where parents are putting their sons or daughters into programs here solely for the purpose of gaining a scholarship to a US university or a Canadian university or any other university?
In the past 2-3 years, there have been a few parents. So our academy, we've been dealing with parents in the last 8 years, but it's only until the last 3 years is when parents have actually come and asked us, is there any opportunity or is there any tie-up where these guys can go, where the children can go for further education. And that's one of the things with the tie-up with Southampton is we are also having an MOU in the next year with a few colleges in Southampton where we say even if your son or daughter doesn't become a player, we are making sure that we are taking care of the education and the holistic development, because the number is very low. Like in India, we don't even have that data of how many children who train make it to the pro. We don't have data like in the footballing developed countries. But yeah, I'm sure the average and the percentage is very low. So here what we are trying to do is we are trying to bridge that gap as well, which the parents really appreciate in India, especially. Academic pressure is very high.
I'm going to bring this to a close with one final question. I'll come to Mads first. There is no such thing as a silver bullet, Mads, but if there was one thing that you would advocate to develop youth, in particular in India, let's focus it on India, what would that be? What would be the one piece of advice that you would give, Mads, for anyone who's considering youth development, any club that's sitting in the room here today or watching this? What would you say?
Well, in the end, when we talk about alignment from the top or culture, in the end, of course, it comes down to the coaches. Coaches are the key. In that perspective, it's very simple. If you want to educate the players, you have to educate the coaches. It's no different than going to school. If you want to learn math, you need a good math teacher. You cannot hire someone that doesn't teach math, and the kids won't learn math. So it's not rocket science in the end, but unfortunately that's a trigger point, because it takes probably a decade or 2 decades to educate a new generation of coaches that understands the demands of the game, that has the right personality, that has the proper communication, that has the long-term view. We don't want more coaches who buy a long coat and they think they are Mourinho. This is a classic mistake also. So we need to educate. But I have to say, I heard the beginning of this session as well, that I met Indian teams back in 2013-14 with some clubs in China, and this March we played against Mumbai in the Champions League, and I have to say that there's a big improvement there. It's a clear sign that Indian football has improved. So that has to be seen as a positive.
And I'll put the same question to you, Richard. From your experience, from your travels that I mentioned before, what's the one nugget of advice that you would give in terms of developing the young talent?
Can't believe Matt's got a big clap there. I've got a lot to do now.
A round of applause for Richard, please. A round of applause, so he doesn't feel left out.
Sorry, yeah. Talk about the ego of the coach. I agree with what Matt said, but I also think when we're looking at measures of success, I think it's really important to understand at youth level we're developing individual players, not teams. And I think far too often people get caught up on the only way we're measuring success is on winning and losing. Of course, we want a winning mentality in our players, and it's sport. We want to win, of course, but that's not the most important thing. Developing individual players, and that might mean that you lose sometimes. And then the measures of success have to be on player development. Who moves through the stages? How many players do you get to the next level? How many players do you eventually get into your first team? That's a measure of success, not just winning a shiny medal that probably nobody's going to remember in the future. So developing individual players, not teams.
Thank you, Richard. I'll bring in Andoni here, who I want an even bigger round of applause for. Andoni, what's your words of advice for, if there was one word of advice that you would give for developing young talent?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with my two colleagues. I'm going to add some ideas to set up the proper academy model. I think is of course the coaches is very important. The idea is that Richard said is to be focused on the player. We need to get the player success, not the team success. But everything is because we need to have and set up a good academy model, and this is a responsibility of the academy director, sport director, or the owner of the club, because he need to set up all the elements. What is our target? Of course, our target is to be focused on the players, and for that we need the best coaches and to organize good coaching programs, because we need to teach coaches first, and after we are going to have good players. But this is the key: set up the proper academy model.
Thank you very much, Andoni. And I think the final round of applause has to go to Prashant. That's definitely what the biggest one so far. Your advice, your nugget of advice that you would give for developing youth talent?
I think the number one focus should be on increasing the participation because what we are seeing, if I use the same metaphor that was used, of course, development of coaches, of course, development of academy. The metaphor used like if children go to school, they need good teachers. But here, children are not going to school because we don't have that many players participating. So if the player participation increases, automatically there's a demand created for the number of coaches. And within that ecosystem, then a proper academy system does become a byproduct. So I think a bottom-up approach is something so increase, and that is why these initiatives like the FIFA Under-17 World Cup, the Women's World Cup, it's primarily towards increasing the participation in making the sport, popularizing the sport at the grassroots level, which increases the participation. So I think that should be step one. And other steps are important definitely, but they become more of a byproduct.
Thank you, Prashant. So the message is get involved in coaching, especially in this country. If you want to get involved in football, it would be well worth your time. Thank you to Tony and Richard and Mads who joined us virtually, and to Prashant who is here on the stage. Thank you very much.